Hey guys, how's it going? Good to see everybody. Just looking in the chat here. Thank you so much for being here, guys. I really do appreciate it. I've been having a few technical issues, so I hope that you guys can hear me and see me okay. It's just, I don't know what's going on at the moment, but we'll battle through it. So you just saw the trailer for the upcoming Phenomenology series that drops May the 1st. You can go and subscribe to the YouTube channel now in advance. So yeah, really looking forward to releasing that and being able to talk about it, because we can't really at the moment. But anyway, let's get on with why we're here tonight. Please let me welcome our guest, Mr. Christopher Sharp. Chris, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. I've got a nice beer here. It's from the Philippines. You can only buy it from specialist Asian stores in London. So it's quite a rarity to actually have this in my hand. So.
Very nice, man. I'd cheers you with a wine, but I'm just on the water tonight. Cheers anyway. So yeah, thank you for doing this, man. I thought we'd just start off, if you could just give us a bit of background on yourself, anything you want to go into, how you got into UFOs, that kind of thing. That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, I would say growing up, I was a little bit of a daydreamer, let's say. Someone who frequently used to bunk school and watch the Discovery Channel or History Channel and watch all the UFO documentaries. So that's how I started off. I mean, even when I was younger, I suppose, when I was I must have been 6 years old. You had to write a story for school, and my story was about a UFO or an alien spacecraft that landed in the local woods, and my friends and I and a dog discovered it, and we went on an adventure in the alien spaceship. So
that's cool.
Where that came from, but the inspiration was there from a young age. But yeah, I mean, I guess when I was older, I kind of fell out of love with it as I started being pragmatic and engaging with what we know, I guess, as the real world. So university, health struggles through a really rare form of epilepsy. And then eventually, when I got that under control, I entered the career of public affairs and public relations, which is it's a very, very difficult, competitive world. So when you go to a big public affairs or communications, let's say, agency in London, it's just stacked full of like Oxbridge graduates, and most of them are looking for a career in politics. They think they're going to be the next Tony Blair or David Cameron. So I guess when you're working in that kind of atmosphere, people like that scoff at conspiracies. And yeah, they're very much kind of talking about, Westminster gossip and stuff like that. So I was very, very well versed in that world. But I think when the Corbell stuff came out on Joe Rogan, and when Bob Lazar re-emerged, I think that's where my interest ignited again. And then obviously Tom DeLonge as well. I still find this really, really difficult to digest. I was watching him on Joe Rogan. I thought he was crazy. I wanted to reach out to him saying, look, are you okay? But, a lot of the things that he said came true. So I no longer scoff at Tom DeLonge, and I take everything he says seriously. I'm not someone who takes one position or another position most of the time. I just listen and I take it into account for reference. And then if something, and this is how I kind of treat my stories as well. And if something emerges that kind of like connects to what Tom DeLonge or someone said earlier, then that's something that I can use, So yeah, I just find it really interesting finding patterns. But sorry, I digress. But yeah, I mean, I became interested in it again through that kind of stuff. COVID hit. And then I think everyone just when COVID hit, everyone started reevaluating everything in their lives. And for me, I just thought, screw this. I can see Elizondo and Sean Cahill and people like that, Chris Mellon, Mean Business. I want to help them as much as possible. So obviously we did UAP Media UK. I did Liberation Times, and ever since then, we've made some really, really good progress, I think, especially in our work in terms of engaging senators and US politicians, congressmen. So yeah, I mean, that's a long and winding kind of like road to where I got to where I am. And Liberation Times, it just started as something just kind of like, I quit my job in the summer and I thought, okay, let's just do a little blog, do a few articles and stuff, no pressure, just kind of like in my free time. And then it just transformed into just something completely insane to where I'm averaging like 60,000 views per month, and
Wow.
didn't know where so and then it kind of turns into something whereby at first you're writing an article, it's just for fun, let's see how it does the next day, hopefully I don't get too much flack on Reddit, to something where like every article is important, and there's a pressure on that and there's expectations.
No, it's great. And the thing is your articles have been retweeted by some of the most prominent figures in the community. I mean, that must show that you're obviously on the right track, or you're doing something right. I mean, how did that feel when you started seeing that? Lou Elizondo, Leslie Kane, I mean, most of them, to be fair, Ross Coulthard. How does that feel? Does it just validate what you're doing?
It just gives me a lot of confidence, I suppose. I'm someone, I don't have a natural sense of confidence. I'm always questioning myself. And I guess that's what kind of makes my articles what they are as well. But it just feels absolutely brilliant. And, George Knapp as well has retweeted, him in addition to Ross Coulthard, just kind of like heroes in terms of journalism. So Leslie Keane as well, obviously, it's just the fact that they're reading my articles and they see some positives in what I'm doing has just really, really helped me a lot. So yeah, it's just felt great. And a lot of the time, it would be, I think, Paul Reddington or Scott on Twitter who'll just like send me a message or something saying, look, you kind of like mentioned your article, and each time I'd just be in shock, it just feels brilliant. Yeah, it feels really great.
No, it's good. I think it does. It shows that you're doing the right thing. You're covering the right aspects of the subject, and you're writing it in a very constructive and thorough way. So, yeah, I think it's all deserved.
Yeah.
Now, what I wanted to do was just take it back to sort of last summer with the preliminary assessment that came out. What were your thoughts leading up to that? Because there was a buzz all around the world, in fact, when it came to the subject. Did you feel that buzz? Did you heighten your expectations or keep them low? And then following the release, what were your thoughts afterwards?
Yeah, I thought the media and others who should know better were just getting too carried away. I think the likes of like Brian Bender and some of the people who cover Washington, who are used to like bureaucratic kind of like process and kind of like boring toned down language that they use, that they knew what to expect, but a lot of the other media didn't really. And I think that led to this kind of sense of it not living up to what they thought it was going to be. But in actual fact, when you do look at that report, that preliminary assessment, I mean, yes, they're using bureaucratic language, but it's also astonishing. They're basically saying in some instances there are these craft that can perform just beyond what we know of in terms of physics and technology. And I think it's safe to say now, seeing what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, which is obviously on everyone's mind at the moment, that Russia doesn't have that technology. Yeah. It doesn't. I mean, the Russian economy is in the state as well. If it had that kind of technology / physics, don't you think they would use it for their to boost their economy or something? Of course they would. And then China, in turn, it kind of copies Russian technology especially in terms of the fighter jet technology. Right. And I mean, it's recently been documented they've actually really struggled with their kind of jet engines and stuff for the next generation of fighters. So, I mean, it just seems very, very unlikely that they're going to have that type of technology to me. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't really, I didn't really feel let down. I just felt that it had a sense of momentum to it because there were next steps that were going to be taken. So the Hicks memorandum that was released basically said that there would be follow-on action.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know now that follow-on action, and I think probably Mellon and people like that knew at the time it wasn't going to go far enough because it was just going to be restricted to US defense ranges, for instance. And also it didn't really seem to cover the transmedium aspect of the phenomenon either. So it seemed very, very restrictive. So, I mean, looking back, it seemed inevitable that there would be pushback, saying that memorandum on the follow-on activity, which led to AOIMSG, wasn't going to be enough. So, yeah, I think that was quite interesting looking back at it. And obviously, you know, I think it was in September that we first heard rumbles from Congress and Gallego that there needed to be new legislation with a push from Congress to actually push the ball further into field. And also, obviously, you know, I think the big kind of comparison that you can draw is the fact that there is nothing within AOMSG when it was formed back in December that had an unclassified component to releasing a report either, whereas the new UAP office does.
Yeah, it would have seemed like AOIMSG would have just kept things in a highly classified annex or area, but at least the new office does seem to show that it's trying to do a bit more and push for a little bit of transparency. But let's go back to just after the June 25th assessment. And over here in the UK, we saw the conversation sparked in the House of Lords, which I found quite disappointing. Do you recall that conversation?
Yes, I do. So it was one of the Conservative Lords that actually requested the debate. Let me just see if I can get up here. A House of Lords. So I mean, what you had Defence Minister Baroness Goldie from the government, who was the government's representative / spokesperson in the Lords for that. So yeah, it was Lord Safraz who brought up the question. And it was just a boilerplate response, basically, from the Minister of State. I mean, it's difficult to know what to read into that, to be fair, because it just doesn't square. I mean, she was answering questions about the preliminary assessment, but now there is good reason to know, you know, via the questioning of Nick Pope, that the Ministry of Defence hasn't even read the classified version of the report. So if air defence is paramount to the UK security and it doesn't see UAP as a threat, how come they haven't read the classified version of the report? How does that make sense?
It doesn't, but it was amazing because today we had that answer for that question that was asked in Parliament as well, and we actually got a different response for the first time in a long time, because the same boilerplate response was used every time people were sending letters and things like that. But we actually now got the fact that they will not discuss any classified information that's been shared by allies. And I thought it's not the best statement, but it's nice to see a different answer to something after just the same no national security issues before. So I think it's a step in the right direction, even though it's so far from what we want. What do you think?
Yeah. They sent me the same. I think they sent me the same response. I mean, I asked about it to an MOD spokesperson and got slightly flustered because I kept on pushing. And in the end, they had to pass me through to someone from the RAF.
Oh, really? They're very good at that, though, aren't they? Just passing people around until they have to actually come up with something.
Yeah.
It is frustrating.
But then in answer to Lord Black, that's someone else who didn't participate in the debate in the summer.
Yeah, and Lord Black, I mean, there's got to be people within the House of Lords and Parliament as well that are actually probably do want to see more on this subject. It's probably the stigma is still, rampant over here in the UK. So I bet there's just that hesitance to bring it up or take a stance on it. But hopefully that'll change.
Lord Black is very, very important. He's a senior figure. I think he's chair or vice chair of Telegraph Group. So he's got some influence in the media, for instance. And also, I mean, historically, he's been the one most likely to take interest in this. He's spoken out about it before. I think it was, I mean, you may know this better than me, but from my understanding, there were a series of incidents in the 1970s. Is it Pembrokeshire or something like that in Wales that some school kids saw?
Yep. Yeah, there was the Welsh flap. I think it was part of the Welsh Triangle.
That's it.
And a lot of people, just to clarify, people hear the Welsh Triangle. It wasn't a triangle object. There's actually 3 locations that, map out a triangle. And it was all within that area throughout the 70s that there were just so many waves of UFO sightings. So, yeah, people always get that, like, where's this triangle case? It's like, it's not a black triangle or anything. But, yeah. Now, moving on, I think around that time as well, after the June 25th report, we just saw a massive, a massive slump in nobody was hearing anything. People were starting to get a bit frustrated. But then we had San Marino and Project Titan, and you covered that really well as well. So what were your thoughts on hearing that? And can you tell us a bit about it and where you think it might be headed?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I'd firstly say that people shouldn't get too dejected when there's a lack of press coverage and whatnot, because conversations are happening behind the scenes all the time. And from what let's say, been told, that a lot of people who have seen this from within the DoD, the intelligence communities, and even Congress or congressmen, they've been quite shocked by what they've seen. It has rattled them. So, despite the fact that we're not getting a commentary of it, and it's not kind of a big media, it's not big in the media agenda, there is stuff happening. But in regards to San Marino, yeah, it's what's needed, because this is an international debate. We do need to get around the table and coordinate with allies and partners, and maybe even some foes, to actually discuss what is going on. And I feel that there is a very, very good chance that Project Titan is going to be a success eventually. It may take longer than expected with what's going on in the world at the moment. And I know that Paolo Guzzardi is doing a lot behind the scenes to keep the momentum going there.
Yeah.
But I just feel when you look at the actual fundamentals of Project Titan, it makes sense, because it's a win for San Marino.
Yeah.
I think they'll get the nudge from certain people within the US government as well that it's safe to go ahead, and the US will probably get its allies to toe the line as well eventually. So I think it's going to be. It may take longer than expected with what's going on at the moment, but I think eventually we'll get there, and maybe in a few months' time or a year or so, certain individuals within the UFO community will be booking flights to New York to see some of the debate.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's so needed, because if it all goes through and forward through the UN and stuff, it'll open the conversation up in Europe massively, and we'll probably start seeing many countries talking about it, and maybe even some declassified files coming out of some of the European countries. That would be fantastic. I think they're all held back by the stigma still over here compared to the US. So yeah, fingers crossed. I think it's a positive thing, but yeah, absolutely right. I think there's going to be delays, probably due to what's happening at the moment with Russia and Ukraine, and I can totally understand that. Things have to be done right, and the focus has to be 100%. So yeah, totally understand. Let's move on. I think it was October, we saw Robert Salas raising funds to organize this press club event that he did get and he put on. But to me, it felt like it didn't get the attention that it deserved. The media didn't really pick up on it. I think it was quite a small event. What are your thoughts? Because, I mean, obviously we know that the nuclear aspect of the subject is huge, but for some reason that sort of came and went. Do you think it was timing, or do you think it was successful?
I think it was successful in terms of the fact that US politicians and their staffers were paying attention, and certain
Right.
people in the DoD. So I think from that perspective, it kind of helped the conversation within the halls of Congress. From a media perspective, it's never going to be a big story now because it happened so long ago.
Yeah.
If it was, if you got someone new coming forward saying, look, 2 years ago, there was this big event that happened and all the nuclear weapons on the submarines below the Atlantic activated and I was silenced. That's a very, very big story, that was only 2 years ago. And, and that's a new story. But I think in terms of Salas, I think it's just although it's still shocking, it deserves to be a big story in terms of press values and the way that the media works. I kind of felt that it was never going to be something that was going to be a big deal, sadly, although it should have been.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think even Robert Salas himself seemed frustrated in a few of the interviews that he did around the time, both before and after his event. You could almost see the frustration that he was just, because he was really calling for congressional hearings back in October, before we'd heard of AOIMSG, and it was the early days of the Gillibrand Amendment. So, yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts on that, on congressional hearings? Do you think that that's something further down the line that we should seriously consider, or is it just wishful thinking?
I think it is being considered very, very seriously by certain committee chairs. I think that is the secret weapon that you have. If there is frustration and obfuscation occurring from the government, then the elected branch of government would be like, look, we're getting just as, I like to feel that congressmen, politicians to say, are getting just as frustrated as us. And I get the feeling they want us to see some of what they've seen as well, because it helps them. It vindicates them to actually see some of those classified materials. And there does seem to be the amount of secrecy surrounding it is just excessive. And I think that the frustration may boil over, and that this is their trump card called hearings. I would always caveat that if hearings are going to take place, you're not going to hear anything about it. A lot of due diligence needs to occur for the hearings to take place. There's a lot of preparation needs to occur. Basically, every question asked in hearings, the committee needs to know the answers to those questions before they've even asked a person.
Yeah.
From the DoD. Anything short of that, and it just turns into a circus and it turns into complete failure. So it's got to be. I like to think that we've got one opportunity, and it's got to be done right. Yeah. It can't be rushed. They need to take their time in preparing for public hearings if they are going ahead. And that's what I'd caution. So when people say, oh, we want public hearings now, we want them now, let's give them some time, let them think about the questions, let them do their research. And I think if that occurs, then I think we'll see some real movement. In terms of hearings, I think if they are going to take place, there are two options. If there's a lack of progress in terms of the UAP office, perhaps we could see them before October when the unclassified version of the annualized report is coming out. But otherwise, we may see hearings, because I think they're going to happen regardless. Maybe next year, perhaps.
Do you think they might just sort of go to the other way and just do closed hearings?
I think there's already been closed hearings. I think,
right.
I mean, I need to reference that, but I think it was Senator Carson who said that they've already kind of held closed hearings on that. Although I think Dean Johnson may have to correct me in terms of my terminology there, but he did say that there have been kind of closed hearings, and I think it's very much in the politicians' interest that these are public hearings, because they put their necks on the line now for an issue which has been widely scorned for such a long time. Gillibrand has presidential hopes. Rubio does. Gallego, I mean, he's got a shot now of getting into the Senate. And all all these courageous politicians spoken up. They want to be vindicated. They want to say that, look, this is why I've made such a big deal about this. Now you can all see it. That's what they want to. So I think it's very much in their interest to have public hearings.
Yeah, I think another important aspect is for them to subpoena the right people as well. So, like Lou Elizondo, for example. I mean, imagine that, where he could just, the NDA that he has just completely is irrelevant, and he can just spew it all out to them. I mean, that's a dream.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would love that. I'd absolutely love it. And yeah, you said subpoena the right people. What I would really like to happen, I would love the DOE, Department of Energy, to come forward and tell us what it knows, because not a lot of people are speaking about that. But if you remember on the Joe Rogan Experience, Chris O'Malley, when asked if he was president, where would he go? Where would he look? And he said DOE. And don't forget, that's where Patel was based as well. And if you remember, when in the Phenomena, Jacques Vallée said, that document changed my life forever. And that's the document he was referring to, was a document which showed that there was another investigation going on at that time as well, which was much better funded, that seemed to be coming out of Patel. So I think there's definitely stuff going on with the DOE, and I'd love to see some officials from the DOE, especially those guys who are in control of protecting nuclear weapons. I'd love those guys to come forward.
So I always wonder if that's where the crash retrieval programs are, somewhere between DOE in the grey, slightly outside of the black, just in really hidden annexes. It's fascinating because there's zero evidence, but you have to think, if they are somewhere, and they've been hinted at for so long by so many people, that possibly where could they be? And yeah, I just find it so interesting. But speculation is it's a dodgy one, isn't it? You can't go too far. So
you can connect dots, you can kind of let it build up in the background, and if something sparks the legitimacy of your speculation, that's something to kind of look at. I think it was Bob Lazar who claimed that, was he working at, is it Los Alamos that he was working at when he saw it?
Apparently
within a DOE facility. Sure. But yeah, I mean, it's very, very interesting to what I know. And obviously Jacques Vallée as well said that some parts of that UAP that was shot at over Washington in the 1950s, the material was taken to Patel.
Right.
So, yeah, I'd be very, very interested to see what's going on at Patel.
Absolutely. I think something that surprised us all as well towards the end of last year was the Our Future in Space event at the Washington National Cathedral, with DNI Avril Haines and Avi Loeb, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Nelson as well. I mean, I was so shocked when I saw that advertised. It was just that mix of people in that location. But obviously the one thing that really stood out for me, and I'll quote it, I've got it in front of me, is the quote by Avril Haines. It's just a little bit that she said, and I'll quote now: "Of course, there's always the question of, is there something else that we do not understand, which might come extraterrestrially?" I mean, that's the first time I've heard extraterrestrially, to be honest. But I mean, that was quite a big statement. What did you think?
She needs to unleash her inner Jim Radcliffe predecessor. She's seen stuff, obviously, I think. And I think when you look at Avril Haines, she's a very, very calm, collected person, very, very restrained. I mean, for her to kind of use that language, and obviously she's getting a bit stifled when she's saying it as well. I mean, I think that speaks volumes. Yeah, I think it was just a very, very interesting occasion. She didn't have to turn up to that event. You got Avi Loeb, you got Jeff Bezos, astronomer and a guy who's running a space program, and you've got a theologist as well discussing alien life. Why do you need the director of national intelligence there as well? What does she have to do with it? Obviously, she didn't have to accept, but she did. I think she knows her place in the history books, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going to give a quick shout out. Christian Thompson, thank you so much. Says, "Hi, Vinny and Chris, keep up the good work." Thanks, Christian. You too, man. If anybody doesn't, go and check out Christian's website, uapdb.com. It is the go-to place for everything UFO and UAP, news articles, podcasts, everything you could want. So thank you so much.
He collects so much good material, that guy does. Absolutely. I mean, that's so many good people for you. I'd like to do a shout out as well to Edwin Trowell. He's really, really lovely
Oh,
guy.
Edwin, is he here? I've not been keeping my eye on the chat, but yeah, Edwin, if you are here, Edwin, good to see you, my friend. Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, Edwin's really cool. One thing I am interested in is your thoughts on the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon book and how it kind of, I was going to say cleared up some of the confusion between ATIP and ORSAP, but I don't think it cleared that much up overall. I think there are still some little points in there. But what did you think? I mean, because that for me came out of nowhere, that book.
Yeah. So obviously Jim Lakowski, he seems like a very, very cautious person, and from my understanding, he's received threats and stuff like that, perhaps. So it's gone under the radar for quite a long time in terms of that book, and obviously it had some sign-off procedures as well. In terms of the ALSAP ATIP stuff, I just find that just laborious. I mean, that's looking at the trees, the train's already left the station and you're still kind of like trying to find I don't know, you're still staring at the ground asking, what is this? I don't know. It's just silly. At the end of the day, like the people who are questioning like the difference between ALSAP and ATIP, I mean, obviously this is a classified world that we're talking about. We're talking about complex bureaucracy and whatnot, and we're talking an element of humanity as well. People make mistakes and stuff. Like Leslie Kane, I mean, like this ATIP slide everyone's going on about where she spelt it wrong. Just silly. I mean, like, why are people focusing on that? I mean, look at the stuff that's actually being achieved. I mean, you've got an IG assessment that's been launched. You've got a new UAP office. Recently, you had a member of Canada's Parliament who's now speaking out about it. I mean, you've got big senators speaking out about it. And by the way, all these people in terms of US politicians who are saying, look, I don't think it's ours, or, this is crazy what I've seen and whatnot, they're actually privy to classified material, unlike the people who are just kind of like looking through the haystack. So I mean, it's just really stupid. I think why are you looking at the trees when there's a whole forest, and things are moving forward? I don't know. It just seems very, very pedantic to me. But
no, I mean, I think you're right. It is.
If you want to focus on that, knock yourself out. I'll keep on covering the news that matters, the stuff that actually shows progress and stuff. Because I know that Kirsten Gillibrand isn't reading these articles thinking, oh my gosh, he's got a point. ALSAP and ATIP. I mean, if you've seen like a image of a potential alien craft doing maneuvers that you've never kind of like seen before, you're not thinking that stuff. You're thinking, look, this is a national security risk. These things, as Luazon's claimed, buzzing our aircraft and our Navy ships on a regular basis. We need to sort this out. They're not thinking about ALSAP and ASIP. Come on, like, sorry. But Skinwalkers of the Pentagon. I mean, I spoke to Colin Kelleher recently. Really, really nice guy. I worked with him and George Knapp and James Bukowski, and wrote an article about it. I just thought it was really, really interesting. And if you look at the appendices of the books, they kind of laid out a structure of how you could kind of start a UAP office, and you can find some similarities between what was in there and what was within the congressional legislation, which I found quite interesting. And then obviously as well, I think the thing that I found most interesting is the fact that, I mean, what was said to me by Colm is that, there are people with significant health impacts in terms of psychological, from the ontological effects, and in terms of physical health as well, even from the Nimitz. So there are people from the Nimitz, from my understanding, who have not come forward yet, who are suffering or have suffered the impact in terms of what happened on that day, which I find really, really interesting, and obviously quite terrible as well. And it just makes you think, like, how often is this happening to pilots, who are getting radiation burns or microwave damage from these UAP? And that's, I just find it really, really interesting from my understanding as well of what Gary Leland has said, that intelligence officers are kind of getting these impacts as well from UAP. And that makes me think, because, okay, it makes sense that, you could be like an F-16 pilot or whatever, and you come into contact with UAP and you get radiation burns and stuff. Like, you're going to come across a UAP eventually, I suppose, if you're flying in a hot zone like the East Coast.
Yeah.
What about intelligence officers? How are they coming into contact with UAP? It makes you think. I don't know.
Yeah. It shows there must be an awful lot that's classified and still happening that we just have no idea about. And yeah, that's crazy to think. Now, you're talking about moving forward and stuff. I did personally felt that when AOIMSG was announced, that it was just like something that was thrown out there to just derail the Gillibrand Amendment. What did you think when that suddenly came up?
So, I mean, when you read the Hicks memo from after the preliminary assessment was released, they kind of promised they would have this follow-on activity. So when looking at the hindsight, I can see where that was coming from, and I can see why Lou and Mellon pushed for something much bigger as well, because they knew what was coming, perhaps. And obviously, we can question the timing as well, just before Thanksgiving or when it was released. And it just seemed to me that it was AUSD, INS. It was their kind of swoop to try and claim this yet again. And it just seems to me that, looking from it at the outside at the time, it looked to me that Kathleen Hicks, and although I know it's not the case now, Admiral Haynes, just looking to sidestep responsibility, just say, let's just give it to the under office of the Secretary of Defense instead. And then when you look at the actual UAP office legislation, they're like, no, actually it's way too important for this. This has got to be led by the Secretary of Defense, which means that Kathleen Hicks, who's the Deputy Secretary of Defense, she's like saying, oh, this isn't important enough for me, and like Congress is like going, no, it's too important for you. Which is quite funny. And it's got to be led by Avril Haines as well. But I think in terms of Avril Haines, we should be quite. I think from my understanding, the DoD is kind of like, if you can put this in layman terms, saying, look, wink, we've got this under control, leave this up to us, we'll lead this, we'll get everything through, we'll do all the work and stuff. And I think they've kind of screwed this up and made Avril Haines look bad in the process. And perhaps she's coming for some flack from the Intelligence Committee for that. So I think now she may be, or her office may be, trying to actually right some of those wrongs. But in the long term, I think, although AOMSG was within the OUSDI, in terms of legislation that's passed by Congress, there's no way that it can actually take on that responsibility. It's too much. It's too much. They can't do it. They don't have the capability. They're an oversight office. They're not. They don't like have the ability to contract and things like that, and they don't have the resources to kind of like commit to that mission. So I mean, long term, there's no way that. I mean, they say that it's with the USDI and S at the moment, but long term, I can't see that working out. And I think Dean Johnson rightly said that, just give it time, and eventually you might see some change in terms of who the overseeing body or agency is in terms of the UAP office. So yeah.
I mean, we're coming. Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you said there. And we're coming now into it's March, and I'm sure we're due some. Well, not we. I'll rephrase that. The first classified briefing should be due at the end of March, but we've not heard anything since everything became law towards the end of December. I mean, I even asked Lou last week, I think, about who's running it right now. Is it still UAPTF, AOIMSG, or has the new office been implemented? But he wouldn't answer, and that's fair enough. But you told me something earlier. Let's bring that back up about your interactions, let's say, with the DoD recently.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of what's happening, I've been discussing this with Susan Goff, my bestie. She's no. So basically, there is no entity officially there is no entity called the UAP office. It's AOIMSG. That's what it is. So it's basically AOIMS, as they see it, AOIMSG has this new mission set up by Congress, and it needs to basically work to implement and reflect the will of Congress. So that's what it's been doing for the last few months, basically, looking how it can implement the guidance, as they put it, although it's not guidance, it's legislation, it's the law, I would say. So currently officially the status is that, this is a quote from Susan Goff, we are currently coordinating, implementing guidance across the department and with interagency partners to ensure that the AOIMSG meets congressional intent. She added, we're transitioning the mission of the former UAP task force to the AOIMSG while under a continuing resolution. The examination and analysis of UAP incursions into special use airspace continues at fiscal year 2021 levels. So, I mean, in short, guys, that means that nothing has changed.
Yeah.
So, despite this kind of being signed off by Biden in December, and despite the first classified briefing to committees coming up this month, they're still at 2021 levels. So basically, they have not implemented the guidance, as they may put it, but the law in terms of what Congress has asked for. So I expect in the next classified briefing this month that there's going to be a lot of politicians who are going to be very, very annoyed. And I feel that might break the camel's back, let's say. So.
Well, we've got the Inspector General's investigation still going on, looking at how they were looking into the UAP subjects back in 2021. Now, if they keep doing that, then the IG is going to be on their back, surely, before long. Come on, what's going on? We've got this new law and you're not even implementing it as it should be. I mean, that's mind-boggling.
Yes, that's what I wrote about the other day, about why Senator Gillibrand seemed so perplexed in her tone and so annoyed when she was questioning the nominee for the new DoD IG. I think that was why she wants to put pressure on OUSDI and S. She wants to put pressure on her office, basically, to say, look, get your act together, because once this new IG comes into office, you're going to have a whole lot of trouble. Not only are you going to struggle actually implementing and meeting the congressional intent, you're actually going to have these guys looking at you as well. And it's going to come from a very, very top guy. So I think they're maximizing pressure out of annoyance, basically, of what's happening at the moment and the pace of things. If you have to imagine, if you're a senator, your portfolio or what you're scrutinizing is defense, and you're seeing that this stuff is happening on a regular basis in terms of UAP buzzing naval ships and whatnot. This is really serious, and this is quite urgent to get to the bottom of this, especially, we don't know if it's Russia, and let's just play devil's advocate. Russia has just invaded Ukraine. Obviously, Putin seems unhinged. Let's say if some of these are Russian drones, let's play devil's advocate, then isn't it even more alarming that this stuff is happening? And despite this, there just doesn't seem to be any urgency on the part of OUSDI and S to actually get to the bottom of it. So, yeah, if I'm in the shoes of politicians, I'm getting really annoyed at the moment if I'm them.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think as well, we've just got to play the long game, haven't we? It's like Lou has always said, it's a marathon and not a sprint. And there's always going to be, infighting between Congress and the Pentagon and stuff. So I think it's just a case of, we've just got to hope that the people are doing the right thing behind the scenes. I'm confident that they are, from some people that I've spoken to. I just think we've just got to have these little battles, let them play out, and then we might start seeing some results towards maybe October, when we get the first declassified report, or unclassified report, should I say. So yeah, fingers crossed. Now, you mentioned it earlier, but the Canadian government have recently sort of entered the conversation. Let's say last week, I think it was the Deputy Minister of the Department of Natural Resources something about getting a report prepared based on UAP incidents. So that's really good. And I mean, I don't necessarily want to touch upon it in detail, but it makes us think like we really need to get our butts into gear over here in the UK. Where do you see the conversation going in the UK? And if you don't see it going anywhere, what can we do to kind of help?
I think the conversation is going to go somewhere sooner or later. I mean, if you look at the language of the UAP office, there is language there to actually coordinate with allies and partners from other nations. So it will happen. I believe that there's this is a close intelligence relationship there. It could possibly be in terms of US intelligence and UK intelligence. And despite the MOD saying they've not read the classified version of the report, which I found very hard to believe, I suspect that many within the UK intelligence community have. Perhaps there's a few people within defense intelligence, for example, that have actually read it. So I think that it's going to go somewhere sooner or later. And I'll just caveat that by saying watch your space, that I think there's going to be a big push soon in terms of what's happening in the UK, as in other countries as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've had conversations with people in the last few months saying that they believe that the UFO office here in the UK didn't end in 2009, that these people think that it's still happening, and they even think they know where it's based location-wise. And that, I mean, obviously, to me, that's just pure speculation, but it kind of makes sense that something would suddenly, why would it suddenly stop in 2009 when they were really on top of the subject back then? The amount of documents that came out up until about 2013 was incredible. And then nothing. I just find that so hard to wrap my head around. But like you said, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Finally, I got to ask, what is next for you and the Liberation Times?
Absolutely. No, so I mean, we're working on some big stories at the moment. I think when we first started out at Liberation Times, we put out quite a lot of stories, stories that needed to be covered, to be honest, at the Catholic Church and stuff like that, in my opinion. We covered opinion pieces alongside breaking news and new insights. Now what we're going for is we're going for kind of like the big fish in terms of the big stories. So I mean, there are three spanners in the works. I mean, when you're working on a story, you never know which one's going to come to fruition or not.
Right.
But I would just say, like, watch your space. I mean, I think in coming months and years ahead, you're going to hear a lot more from those, let's say, veterans who have been a victim of persecution from the Department of Defense in terms of UAP. I think you're going to hear people come out and openly speak about that now. So hopefully that we can be on top of that, let's say.
Nice.
I'll give you a little breadcrumb there. So yeah, I think and all I'm worried about is just providing value to the community and just helping people's understanding how complex issues work and kind of like making that into digestible form so people can easily understand it. So yeah, I mean, yeah, watch your space, as I've said before. But I think there's going to be some really, really cool things to come from Liberation Times. And of course, as well, I think like the main thing is, I mean, Liberation Times, yeah, we're doing really well, getting more views, like 60,000 views per month, which is great. But we're never going to be like a big publication. So I want to ensure that when we're working on the big stories, that we're doing so in tandem with kind of like international press as well. So yeah.
Nice. I appreciate it. Now, for anybody that might be listening to this on audio only, because the links are below for all of your social medias and that, but if people aren't on YouTube then, and they are listening, where can people find you?
Okay, so you can find me on Twitter. So that's probably the platform that I use most often. So my handle is @real C Sharp. So REALCSHARP. And then Liberation Times as well. So Liberation Times website is www.liberationtimes.com, and then the Twitter handle is basically Liberation Times. So yeah, that's how you can find me. There's lots of stories on there that you can read. I would suggest that you read the story about what's coming up in 2022, and then you can hold me to some of my predictions as well. It's called Expect the Unexpected in 2022 as UFOs go global. So yeah, I might have to retweet that a few times this year.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's great. Listen, thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation. It's always good to get your input and your viewpoints on the subject and what's going on. Keep up the great work with Lib Times. We all love it. We really appreciate the work that gets put into it. And yeah, and to everybody watching and listening, I really appreciate you guys being here live. It always means so much to me. So yeah, we will be back. I'm having a week off, and I'll be back next Tuesday with Avi Loeb. So yeah, go and check out all my social medias. You can leave questions if you have anything for him. But for now, guys, I will see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you all. Take care. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Vinny.
No problem, friend. Take care.